On today's episode of Garage Noise, I'm going to teach you how to prepare your car for primer. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know and how to do it right. Can you dig it? So we're also going to touch a little bit on different types of primers and what type of primer is good for your application. If you need more information about that, check out the video at the end. It'll give you all the information you need to know. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to do is evaluate the condition of the vehicle and the paint. And if you look closely here, you can see there's cracks in this paint. Now this is a fiberglass panel. So these cracks have come from the substrate, which is the fiberglass, up. So these cracks all need to be sanded smooth and removed. The truck we're painting, that bed is off of this truck. Now, this truck has been stripped down to bare metal, sanded smooth, and in order to do that, I'm not sure how they did it because I didn't strip this, the customer did, but basically you're just sanding all the paint off. You might want to use 80 grit on a DA and that will strip it off. Or you could use a chemical stripper that will lift the paint and you scrape it off. Now that creates a real mess. It's a lot of times it's easier to sand it off, but just because you're painting your entire vehicle does not mean it needs to go down to bare metal. If the condition of the paint is in decent shape and there's just some scratches or a little bit of fading, you don't have to strip it down to bare metal. In fact, it's probably not best that you do that because that will remove some rust inhibitors and some things that you want to have underneath your paint. Now, so you have to evaluate your paint, take a look at it, see what it needs. So if your paint is in the condition of this, where it's very sun damaged and faded and cracked, you need to remove it. You need to remove at least the area that is delaminated or cracked. It needs to be stripped down to the substrate. So, which in this case is fiberglass. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to take a look at the rest of the panel. And as you can see here, this has some fiberglass damage, some cracks. This will need some body work done. And I'm going to do that, but I won't show you how to do that today. I'll have another video on that, on how to repair this fiberglass damage. We are concerned about the paint today. Now, even if you look down here, the areas of this panel that are out of the sun, I know it's really dirty, but you can still see there's some micro checking, what they call micro checking. And that is very minute cracks in the paint. So yeah, the micro checking, which let's see if you can see, I'm gonna get close. The micro checking doesn't always have to be removed down to the fiberglass or the substrate. You can sometimes 2K primer over that, sand it real well, 2K primer over that, and that'll create a hardened surface over these micro checks that will take care of those. So the first thing we're going to do, and we are going to prime this today. I'm going to show you how to prime it. I'm going to show you everything we need to do to prep it out for primer. So we're going to get started by sanding this entire panel. I'm going to remove the cracks on the upper surfaces here where it's really faded and really cracked, and we're going to use 80 grit on a DA sander to do that, and then we'll move on to the rest of it. We've sanded all this really rough, cracked paint, went over it with 80 grit and removed it. And you can see we're down to the primer layer, this black. There are still some little bit of rough areas, but we're gonna sand this again. We're gonna go over this area with 180. That'll smooth it out even further, and mostly it's gonna remove those 80 grit scratches because we wanna get it down to 320 so we can prime over it. Then we're gonna go around the rest of it, and we're gonna hit any areas that are still a little rough, like there's some chipping and some stuff here. We're gonna go over that with 180 grit on the DA, sand it smooth, and then we'll sand this entire thing with 320. So let's get after it. Okay, so just look at the difference between right there where I just sanded with 180 And you can see how smooth it is, and you can see the coarseness of the 80 grit scratches right next to it. So we want it to all be smooth like this, and then we'll go over it with 320. Okay, here's a good time to show you this. If you have a chip or anything like that in your paint, like that, you want to feather edge that out. So you're basically sanding that and gradually feather edging it out around it so it lays smoothly. Or you might want to fill it with a little something. This one I'm just going to feather edge out as I sand, but you want to be aware of those. Get those sanded out before you prime. Okay, sorry I was jamming to some tunes and busting out some paint prep. But now we have this all sanded. We have it all sanded with 180. All the areas we need to get sanded, but now we need to go over it with 320 grit sandpaper. And 320 is going to remove those 180 scratches, get it down to a fine scratch that the primer can cover very well. The one thing also we want to consider is we need to go around in all these cracks and crevices and these contours and sand it very well with some 320. That's going to allow that primer to adhere properly in those areas so we don't have any peeling when we paint it. And then after we sand in all those cracks and crevices, we're going to talk about the primer and what primer we're going to use on this and why, and what primer you should use in the situation you're in. So let's get back at it. Okay, let's take a look at the panel now. So I've got it all sanded. We've sanded it with 80, with 180, and now with 320. I've went around all these crevices and the cracks, and I've sanded it really well. I've even filled a couple spots with some body filler, some of those fiberglass areas. I have that in another video, and if you want to know how to repair fiberglass, check out the video at the end or in the description. I also have videos on making body filler straight, so you can check out those videos. But this is pretty much prepped out for primer. Now I went in the grooves with some 320, and actually I did go over it with some 180 because it's down in a crevice and it's really not going to hurt anything to primer over 180 in that crack, and I wanted to make sure it was sanded real well. So let's talk about the primer we're going to use. There are a variety of different primers we can use, and let me go over the primers for you. If you want to know more about primers, I'll have a video in the description that you can check out. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about the different types of primers and what you should use them on. Different types of primers. There's primers that can go over bare metal. That is your self-etching primer, your epoxy primer, your polyester primer. Those are the three main primers that can go over bare metal. Now we do have some areas here where we sanded through. This part of the panel is fiberglass, this part is metal. We sanded through to the bare metal, but we're not going to be concerned about that because we're going to use an aerosol self-etching primer on that before we put a 2K primer over this entire panel. Now, let's talk about the 2K primer. 2K primer is a urethane primer that hardens over the surface, okay? It has a catalyst and the primer itself. You mix them together and it hardens over the surface. That is a great primer to use to primer your panel or your vehicle if you're going over paint or body work. It's a high build primer, so you can build it up so you can block body work straight, and it has a lot of forgiving qualities to it. So that's what we're going to use in this application. Most of you will probably be using a 2K urethane primer. Most situations, that's what it's going to call for. Now, if you have to go over bare metal, and if you're stripping your car down to bare metal, you want to use one of the other three. And like I said, check out the video below. Get this wiped down. We're going to tape it off if we need to tape anything off. We're primering this entire bed, so I probably Won't have to tape anything off, but on your vehicle you're going to want to tape anything off that you don't want primer on. Then we're going to clean this. We're going to clean it with a prep solvent, an automotive prep solvent that's going to remove any dust, dirt, contaminants, waxes, anything that's going to cause a reaction with the primer. You want to have a nice clean surface, and like we say, do it right. Now we're going to spray over that bare metal with the self-etching primer. This is going to promote adhesion to bare metal. It's designed to go over bare metal, and it creates a rust inhibitor over that metal. And then we can spray the 2K primer right over top of it. So I'm going to put my protective gear on. And by the way, all the links to all the products and tools I use are in the description below if you're interested in any of those. Let's do it. Okay, we're gonna let that flash off and then spray the 2K clear right over top of it. I've already mixed it up. It's 4:1, 4 parts primer, 1 part hardener or catalyst. Okay, so let's take a look at the finished product. It's all sanded and primed, and look how smooth it is. I've put 3 coats of primer on this, 3 thick coats, and that's gonna be a good base for me now to block it and get it ready for paint. Remember, you can do this at home or in your garage. It's not that difficult. Just follow the steps, evaluate the paint, straighten any dents or dings or chips, sand it with 180 and then 320. You might not have to use 80, and if at all possible, don't use 80, because those are just 80 grit scratches you have to remove later on. Now this was bad enough that I had to use the 80. It was quicker and it was just a time saver, so I used 80 grit first. But you don't necessarily have to use 80. You could start off with 180. If you want to get more information about straightening dents and primer and what primer you should use, check out these videos right here at the end. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. If you want to increase your knowledge and build your skill, start now by subscribing to the channel and clicking that bell. We'll see you next time.